Hello Dragon Wisps, welcome to today's video. Today we're going to be covering part 2 of the Dungeons & Dragons skills tutorial for 3.5, and for this one I'm going to be doing skills letters A through D. So that's going to be appraise, balance, bluff, climb, concentration, craft, decipher script, diplomacy, disable device, and disguise. Before I begin, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel if you haven't yet to become a Dragon Wisp. And if you would like to support the channel more directly, you can do so at the Patreon link in the description below. So without further ado, sit back, relax, and let's learn skills A through D. Okay, so the first skill we're covering is appraise. Appraise is your ability to tell an antique from old junk, a sword that could be an elven heirloom, high quality jewelry from the cheap stuff, things like that. And the way you do this is that you appraise common or well-known objects with a DC 12 appraise check. Now remember, DC is your difficulty class. If you fail, that means you're appraising it somewhere between 50 to 150% of its actual value. And obviously that could work in your favor or against you. Usually against you though, because you'll be either trying to sell it for too much or you'll sell it for way too little. And then if you want to appraise a rare or exotic item, your DC is 15 or 20 or even higher, depending on the actual item itself. Now you can get a bonus of +2 if you have a magnifying glass equipped for small items. And items valued by weight, you get a +2 circumstance bonus. So precious metals, things like that. Now, if you're using magnifying glass and getting the circumstance bonus, they do stack, with things like gems and everything along those lines. Appraising an item takes 1 minute or 10 consecutive full round actions, because remember, a round is 6 seconds. Which you might not remember, because I don't think we actually covered that, because we haven't reached that stage yet. You don't get to try again. A dwarf gets a +2 racial bonus on appraise checks with things related to stone or metal items. And a master of a raven familiar, which is a good familiar to have because it speaks common anyway, you can use it as a messenger, gets a +3 bonus on appraise checks. And if you have the diligent feat, you get a +2 bonus on appraise checks as well. So there's all sorts of ways you can increase your bonus on appraise. Unfortunately, in my experience, it's not a skill that's too often used. So you just have to be careful with that. For common items, you can actually do an untrained check on them. Obviously you won't be super educated, but sometimes you gotta do what you gotta do. The next skill is balance. Balance is your ability, obviously, to balance. So you're walking across a precarious surface, sidling along a wall, walking at a tightrope for some strange reason, things like that. And then the DCs, and remember, these are just base DCs without anything being included. So moving along uneven flagstone, a hewn stone floor, or sloped or angled floor would be a DC of 10 if you're running or charging. Failure by 4 means that you can't run or charge, but may otherwise act normally. So let's just say you're just walking along. You probably won't even need to do a balance check, unless your dungeon master decides, you know what, this is a little too easy, maybe they'll trip. And then you have narrow surfaces, which would be the main time you would want to use, or you would be using balance. So if your narrow surface is 7 to 12 inches wide, your balance DC is 10. 2 to 6 inches would be a balance DC of 15, and less than 2 inches wide would be a balance DC of 20. Because let's face it, you're going to be having a hard time. Now there are certain modifiers that can be applied to this. So lightly obstructed stone, or a lightly obstructed surface would be a +2. Severely obstructed surface would be a +5. A little slippery, so a wet floor would be a +2. Extremely slippery, so ice would be a +5. And a slope or angle would be a +2. It doesn't require any action to do a balance check. And if you have the agile feat, you get a +2 on balance checks. Also, if you remember back to our talk about synergies, you get a +2 bonus if you have 5 or more ranks in tumble. Alright, so the next one we're going to cover is bluff. Bluff is your ability to lie. Generally, it's opposed by a sense motive check, an opposing sense motive check, which means, sometimes it can be really ridiculously easy. Other times, it's not so much. And then the problem is, if you're lying to a group or bluffing to a group, each of them gets a sense motive check. So, because you're going against their sense motive, their DC, like their total roll, is affected by the extravagance of your lie. So, for example, if the target wants to believe you, they have a -5 modifier to their sense motive. If your bluff is believable and doesn't affect them much, no difference. If the bluff is a little hard to believe or puts the target at some risk, it's a +5 to their sense motive. If the bluff is hard to believe or puts the target at significant risk, it's a +10. And if the bluff is just ridiculous, I don't know why anyone would believe it, they get a +20. Now keep in mind, this is 20 plus their roll plus their sense motive check or skill. So, you could be at a severe disadvantage if you don't have enough ranks in bluff. You can also use it to feint in combat. Not faint, but feint. So make a false move. But the target would add their base attack bonus to the roll along with any applicable modifiers to see it coming. So they'd get their sense motive plus any modifiers for whether or not it's believable, plus their base attack bonus, which would be very unfortunate in the end. That being said, if your bluff check result exceeds the special sense motive check result, your target is denied dexterity. So it's really good if you're a rogue trying to get sneak attack. It's iffy whether or not you get to try again. It depends on the situation. Like trying to lie to get past the guards to assassinate a noble probably wouldn't get a reroll. Unless they were different guards, like you waited until the guards changed. Trying to convince somebody in the tavern that you're just a traveling merchant trying to sell some goods, you could get a reroll on that, depending on how badly you failed their sense motive. A ranger using bluff against a favored enemy gets a +2 bonus If you have Persuasive Feat, you get a +2 bonus to bluff. And if you have a Snake Familiar, you get a +3 bonus on bluff. So remember, when you're choosing your familiar, just consider how you want to play your character. Next we have Climb, which is another pretty straightforward one, like Balance was. This is your ability to climb. So if you just have a slope that's too steep to just regularly walk up, or a knotted rope with a wall to brace against, your DC for that's going to be a 0. If you have a rope with a wall to brace against, or a knotted rope, or a rope affected by the rope trick spell, so in this case the rope, like the original rope with the wall to brace against, isn't knotted, whereas the knotted rope would be like your gym class rope. It's a 5. If you have a surface with ledges to hold on to and stand on, such as a very rough wall or a ship's rigging, you have a 10 DC to hit. A surface with adequate handholds and footholds, like natural rocks surface or a tree, would be 15. An uneven surface with some narrow handholds, like a wall in a dungeon or a ruin, would be 20. And then a rough surface, such as a natural rock wall or a brick wall, or an overhang or ceiling with handholds but no footholds, would be a 25. But then a perfectly smooth, flat, vertical surface cannot be climbed, so you don't even get to roll against it. Now there are some exceptions. For example, Spider Walk allows you to walk up walls, so that would be a different situation entirely. Now there are a couple factors that can affect the DC itself. Like, let's say you have 2 walls where you opposite each other that you can use to climb up. That would be a -10 to the DC, just because then you've got extra wiggle room. Climbing a corner where you can brace against perpendicular walls reduces it by 5, but if the surface is slippery, it increases it by 5. And these modifiers do stack, so unfortunately if you've got a corner with perpendicular walls and a slippery surface, there's no change. Climbing is part of a movement, so it's usually a part of a move action. But each move action that includes any climbing requires a separate climb check. So, your turn is up, you want to climb again next turn, it's another check, unfortunately. And let's see, if you use a rope to haul a character upward through sheer strength, you can lift double your maximum load. A halfling has a +2 racial bonus on climb. Master of a lizard familiar gets a +3 bonus, and if you have the athletic feat, you get a +2 bonus on climb. Which brings us on to concentration. So concentration is your ability to focus your mind. So basically, when you're casting a spell that requires you to concentrate, there are actions taken against you, like any action taken against you, that would break your concentration requires you to make a concentration check. So like, let's say if you're damaged, you need to make a concentration check equal to 10 plus the damage dealt. If you're distracted by a non-damaging spell, your concentration DC has to beat the distracting spell's save DC. Violent motion, like a galloping horse or a rough wagon ride, things like that, will be a 15. Extraordinarily violent motion, like an earthquake, would be a 20. And being entangled would be a 15. Being grappled or pinned would be a 20. And then you can only cast spells that don't have somatic components, so movement. Weather is high wind carrying blinding rain or sleet requires a 5 DC. Weather-driven hail, dust, or debris would be a 10 DC. So there's all sorts of things, like factors to go into this, which is why generally I recommend a spell user takes ranks in concentration, because you can't always trust that front line is going to stop the enemy from attacking. Craft is a special skill. It's one of the ones where you need to take different crafts to specialize in them. So you can't just be walking along something you've got no experience with. I make a craft check because I can craft. Most of the classes actually have craft as a class skill. It's just a matter of, like I said, specializing. Okay. So a couple of examples of crafting specialties you can take. So alchemy, armor smithing, bow making, weapon smithing, trap making, woodworking, fletching, things like that. You can have a more specified one as well, as I have seen players do, where it's not so much that the craft itself is difficult, or if they don't get a special bonus because they're focusing specifically on making wooden swords, but it's just a character choice. Honestly, in my experience, I've maybe used craft 4 times in over 15 years of playing. Except, I'm mostly focused on other skills, but it's just, I don't bother crafting too much. Okay, then we have Decipher Script. This is pretty straightforward as well. It's your ability to decipher writing in an unfamiliar language, or a message written in an incomplete or archaic form. Things like that. Maybe something's in code. Who knows? So the standard base DC is 20 for simple messages, 25 for standard texts, 30 or higher for intricate, exotic, or very old writing. If it succeeds, you understand the general context of it. If you fail, the DM makes a DC 5 wisdom check for you to see if you avoid drawing a false conclusion about the text. So, let's say you're trying to read something old, it's got missing words. You think it says, "A brown dog jumps over the fence." There's a chance you misinterpreted that. The action to decipher a single page of script takes 1 minute. So again, 10 consecutive full round actions. You don't get to try again, because it's either you can do it or you can't. If you have the diligent feat, you get a +2 bonus on your decipher script. Next we have diplomacy, which is essentially your ability to negotiate with NPCs as well as other people. But a lot of this a lot of your DC will depend on the person's attitude towards you. So if they really, really don't like you, you need to score a high diplomacy to influence them to like you more. If the person really likes you, you don't need to worry about too much there. You do get to try again if you would like to, but the problem is, because now that you've failed, their disposition towards you has decreased. So it's not necessarily recommended, because it doesn't necessarily have a chance to succeed once you get too far. Perfect example would be Elder Scrolls 3 Morrowind. If somebody's disposition towards you becomes too low, there isn't even any point to trying to negotiate with them. A half-elf gets a +2 bonus on diplomacy checks, and if you have the negotiator feat, you also get a +2 bonus. So, things to think about. The second last one we're going to cover is Disabled Device. This is an intelligence-based, trained-only skill. I believe the Rogue and maybe the Bard have it as a class skill for the base classes. There are other classes like the Ninja, I believe, has it. But this is your ability to disarm a trap, jam a lock, things along those lines. So your DM generally makes your Disabled Device check for you. Depending on the situation, I personally have my players give me their numbers and let them know if it succeeds or not. But generally they recommend that the Dungeon Master does the check so that they're not giving the number to say, hey, well, this is the number I have to beat, so I guess I'll try again. The amount of time for each device type varies. So a simple device is 1 round. A tricky device is 1d4 rounds, so you roll a d4 and that determines how many rounds. A difficult or wicked are 2d4 rounds. But then the DCs are also different as well. So simple is 10, tricky is 15, difficult is 20, and wicked is 25. And then if you're trying to leave no trace behind of you making this attempt, it's an extra 5 on the DC. You can retry if you missed the check by 4 or less, which your DM will let you know, but you have to be aware that you failed in order to try again. If you have the Nimble Fingers feat, you get a +2 bonus, and a rogue who beats a trap DC by 10 or more can study the trap to figure out how it works and bypass it without disarming it. And then here's a fun one that has caused a huge issue in one of the games I played a long time ago. Rogues and other characters with the trap finding class feature can disarm magic traps. I had a DM that told me I couldn't disarm a trap because it was magical. I was a level 14 rogue. I could have disarmed it in my sleep. And now the last one we're going to cover in this video is Disguise. This is your ability to change your own appearance or someone else's in order to blend in, hide, things like that. And there are some things that'll give you a bonus or a negative. You only get 1 disguise check per use of the skill, even if several people are making spot checks against you. So unfortunately, if you don't roll a very good one and it tricks a few people, but then doesn't trick the other people, you don't get another roll. So a couple of things that affect your disguise check modifier. So if you're only trying to do minor details, it's +5 to your check. If you're disguising yourself as a different gender or race, it's -2 each. And if you disguise yourself as a different age category, it's -2 per step of difference between your actual age category. So if you're adult, trying to disguise yourself as young, it's a -2. You're trying to disguise yourself as old, it's a -4. Then there's the familiarity of the people that are making a spot check against you. So if they recognize you on sight, it's a +4. If they're friends of yours or associates, it's a +6. If they're close friends, it's a +8. And if they're intimate with you, it's a +10. Now, you do get to redo a failed disguise, but once others know that a disguise was attempted, they'll be more suspicious of you. And the action to create a disguise is 1d3 times 10 minutes of work. So it can take quite a while before you can be Mrs. Doubtfire. There are magics such as Alter Self, Disguise Self, Polymorph, Shape Change that grant you a +10 bonus on disguise checks. If you have the Deceitful feat, you get a +2 bonus on disguise checks. So that covers that. Skills from A to D. So thank you for joining me for part 2 of the skills videos, redone, where we covered A through D. I wanted to go into more detail on these while still keeping the videos shorter than the previous ones, so that way you get more details. It's not quite as rushed, stuff like that. So I hope you enjoyed it. I hope it was educational, and I hope you tune in next time for the third part. I haven't decided how many skills I'm going to cover in that one yet. So thank you for joining me. I hope to see you next time. Right about now, you should be getting the usual subscribe button up here, latest video on the channel over here, video recommended for you by YouTube over here, and a nice little playlist of the Dungeons & Dragons tutorials over here. Don't forget to comment questions you would like answered. There could be questions about this, or they could just be questions for me to answer in my Q&A video that I want to do. And yeah, again, thank you for joining me, and as always, have a peaceful day. Bye.